Well, hey there, kiddos. Here is our video on writing inequalities. Yesterday, we wrote expressions and equations from words, so now we're going to do the same thing, but only with inequalities. And so that means that everything we write, all of our mathematical statements that we write down are going to have less than or greater than symbols of some sort in them. So if we look at this very first question, the Richardson Boy Scouts have a community garden. They want to fence in a rectangular garden that is adjacent to another community garden. They have at most 42.8 feet of fence. We're going to write an inequality that could be used to find possible lengths of the Boy Scouts garden. These words right here, let me get my pen ready. At most means that that's the most that they can have. So they can have 42.8 at the high end, but then they can also have less than that. So what that means is it's this symbol right here, which is less than or equal to. And so we've got to write an inequality to find possible lengths of the Boy Scouts garden. And here is the garden. This is the new garden they're going to be fencing in. And we happen to know this length right here is 12.3 feet, which means this is also 12.3 feet. But I don't know how long this side or this side of my rectangle are. But I do know that I have this much fence. And so to figure out possible lengths of the Boy Scouts garden, what possible numbers could go here, I'm going to need an inequality. Well, so I need a perimeter. It's a perimeter question because I'm going around the garden with a fence. So I have to add up all these sides. Well, we did this yesterday. I have to do the 12.3. I'm going to write it over here 2 times. And then I have to do the x 2 times because there's 2 of them. And it has to be less than or equal to 42.8. And so my inequality would start out like that, but we want to simplify it. So we're going to grab our calculator and find out what this equals. So when we multiply this by 2, we end up with 24.6 plus 2 times x. I don't have to keep the parentheses, but you could if you wanted to. Has to be less than or equal to 42.8. And if I solve that inequality, which we'll talk about in a week or so, we'll be able to find out what values of x would work to make the Boy Scouts garden happen so that they can use that much fencing. But for today, we just want the inequality, so you're done. So question 2, Chelsea's baby sister is 25 inches long. She is wearing pajamas that fit babies up to 32 inches long. These words are going to be important. It has to go up to that. We want to know which inequality can be used to find x, the number of inches that the baby can grow and still fit into the pajamas. Well, these words up to tell me that 32 is the maximum, but it could be less than that. So again, it is this symbol. It's less than or equal to because it goes up to 32 but can't go over, so it has to be smaller. So I know that when I write my inequality, the baby sister is 25 inches long right now, and she is going to grow X number of inches. And whatever this total is has to be less than or equal to 32. And if you look at my answer choices, I have run into a problem. All of my answer choices, the 32 is over here on the left, and then the problem part's on the right. And so this doesn't match any of those. So if I want to flip this around so that it matches, when I flip-flop these so that they're on different sides, this sign has to turn around too. So it looks like this. That turns as well. Is when you turn an inequality around, everything has to turn around. And so it would look like this. So 32 has to be greater than however the baby gets, otherwise she won't fit in it anymore. And so if you look at your answer choices now, it's going to be this one right here, D. So let's look at a couple more. So number 3 here, a large container of cranberry juice costs at most $4.52. We've talked about those words already a minute ago, and we decided that this was the symbol because at most means that's the most it can be, but it can be less. So if a large container is 86 cents more than 2 times a small container of juice, write an inequality that could be used to find the price of a small container. Well, if we call the small container of juice X, and we're going to write an inequality. Well, I know that it's 86 cents more than 2 times a small container. That's this more than, in this case, is going to be the plus sign because it's 86 cents more than that. That doesn't mean it's greater. It's not the inequality symbol. It just means I'm adding to it. So I'm going to take the price of a small container of juice, which is, we know it's X, and it's got to be multiplied by 2 because it says so, 2 times a small container of juice. And it's 86 cents more than that. So I would have to add my 86 cents to that. And it has to be at most $4.52. And so there would be my inequality. I could have written this the other way too. I could have put the 86 cents first and then added twice the small container. It would have been the same problem as the one before. I just reversed those two. And since I didn't reverse everything in the inequality, the little inequality symbol doesn't have to change. All I did was change things around on this side. So number 4, the area of a triangle shown below is less than 42 square meters. Because it says is less than, that means we're going to use the inequality symbol less than. It doesn't mean subtraction. If it was just going to be a subtraction problem, the word is would not be there. So the area of a triangle is less than 42 square meters. Write an inequality that represents the area of the triangle. Well, our area of a triangle is that base times height divided by 2. So I have the base times the height. I know that I said that backwards, divided by 2. And it tells me that that whole area has to be less than 42 square meters. So that's what the inequality would look like. And you would call it done. So let's switch over here to number 5. So the charge per mile for a sports rental car at Fast Rentals is 15 cents. Mr. Zoom is on a business trip and must rent a car for all of his meetings. Write an inequality for the greatest number of miles Mr. Zoom can travel without going over his budget of $75 per rental for mileage charges. So he can't spend more than $75 on miles. That he can't. If he goes over that, he's going to get in trouble. And so his budget's $75. Well, the per mile charge is 15 cents. So it's going to be 15 cents for every mile. So we're going to have to multiply that times the number of miles. We don't want to go over our budget, so that means it's going to be less than. But it's also less than or equal to, because if I'm right at my budget, I haven't gone over yet. So I can equal my budget as well, which is $75, and we're good. There's your inequality. So now number 6. Number 6 says Kim's parents will only let her play games on her iPhone for an average of 30 minutes per day. She played games for 25, 32, 28, and 33 minutes for the last 4 days. Write an inequality that represents how many minutes she can play on the 5th day without going over her 30-minute average. Again, we can't go over. Everything we've done today has been less than. Hopefully we see some that are greater than at some point, but they're all going to be less than. We can't go more than 30 minutes. So we have to talk about an average. An average means we add up everything that we have and then divide by how many there are. So far, she's played for 25, 32, 28, and 33. So that's where she is. And we have to add the day 5 total. So plus day 5. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things being added. So to find my average, it would have to be divided by 5. And I don't want to go over. Just like up here, I didn't want to go over my budget. Here, I don't want to go over my limit, which is 30 minutes. And so I have to be less than or equal to 30. Now to simplify this, I would add these numbers up together and simplify what I had. But this is a perfectly acceptable inequality that would represent how long she can play. So now I'm going to skip a few here. I'm going to go all the way down to number 9. We'll talk about the other questions on your notes tomorrow when you come to class. But right now we're just going to talk about number 9. So a car salesperson is paid a base salary of $35,000 a year. That means that he gets that $35,000 just for showing up to work. Plus, he gets 8% of their sales. So then they get money tacked onto that for however much they sell. So we got to write an inequality that represents the sales that are needed to have an annual income greater than $65,000. Here we are. We're now got to have bigger. It just says greater than, so it has to be more than $65,000, so it can't be equal to. So it's going to have to be greater than $65,000. And what I know is that they make this $35,000 just because they got up and went to work. How cool is that? But then plus, they get this 8% tacked on. Now, again, like we had in the writing equations one from yesterday, this 8% has got to be converted to a decimal or we can't use it. So I would have to move my decimal 2 spots over so I have a whole. So this becomes 0.08, and that's going to be important. So they get 8% of whatever their sales are. And I'm going to call those X, because if I use the letter S, then it sometimes looks like a 5 and it's confusing. So they make their $35,000 plus 8% of the sales, and it's got to be more than $65,000. That's how I would write that inequality. So we'll practice this some more when you guys come to class tomorrow. I will see you then. Have a good rest of your evening.